Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Massachusetts General Hospital Frontal Temporal Disorders Unit Community Forum Friday series. My name is Katie Brandt. I'm the Director of Caregiver Support Services and Public Relations, and I'll be your guide today for our session, What I Learned from Support Group, a conversation with AFTD support group leader, Amy Almeida, and Alzheimer's Association memory specialist, Jill Hovanasian. I'm going to start our session today with Amy Almeida. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Katie.
Now, Amy, I know that many people in our community know you because you're a support group leader and many other things, but I wanted to read just a little bio about you so we can formally introduce you for those folks who haven't met you yet. Amy joined the FTD community in June of 2010 when her mom was diagnosed with behavioral variant FTD. She began attending the Boston area FTD caregiver support group shortly after and became a support group facilitator herself in June of 2014. As a trained economist, Amy applied her research expertise to her caregiving journey and now does the same for other caregivers. Amy, I love the bio that you sent me.
Well, I hope it was accurate.
I think, of course, I feel like I know so much about you as we've been caregivers together. We've been support group leaders together. And of course, many people know we are gala co-chairs for the MGH FTD Unit Annual Gala. But really, the thing that strikes me the most when I think about our time together is how thoughtful you are about the experience that other families have and your desire to want to connect them with resources. So I thought maybe as we start our session today, which is all about the resources, the things you can learn, how you can get connected with help in our greater dementia community, I thought maybe you might want to share a little about why you started attending support group in the first place when you were caregiving.
Sure. Katie, it's great to be here with you and Jill today. I started going to the FTD caregiver support group because I wanted to learn. I never, well, sort of, at least in the beginning, I never felt that I needed the emotional support that a lot of caregivers go to a support group for. I wanted to learn from others. There's no sense reinventing the wheel if I can learn from someone else about how to install a wheelchair ramp at our house, for instance. And that's why I first started going. And of course, occasionally there were times when I did need that emotional support, but I felt most of the time that I was there learning when I was in the caregiver role. And now I do like to share all those resources that I learned about with other caregivers in our support group. And also just in the wider world with my friends and family.
And that's often, I think you touch on something so important there. Oftentimes when families are in those early diagnosis days, I might suggest to them to check out a support group. And members might often say to me, I don't want to do that. I don't want to share my feelings. I don't want to sit around in a circle with strangers and talk about my emotions. I don't need that. And really what we are hoping today is that we'll share, there's this other really informative side of support group that can be so practical. So Amy, I think actually you even have an example of one of the ways that we try to provide people with resources. So could you maybe talk a little bit first about what's the format of the support group that you and I are connected with, which is the Greater Boston FTD Caregiver Support Group?
Sure. Our support group meets every week on the second and last Tuesdays of the month. We meet at 7 p.m. And on all the other Tuesdays, usually it's the first and the third, but sometimes there are 5 Tuesdays, we meet at 10 a.m. And what happens in our support groups right now, they're all on Zoom. We're not meeting in person at all. And because we have a lot of familiar faces, we don't tend to do an introduction at the beginning. Although we ask everyone to put in the chat of the Zoom session their name and their connection to FTD, who they're caring for, and maybe, how long they've been caring or where the person is living, if they're, in the house with them still, if they're in assisted living or long-term care. I and you at the beginning, we usually make announcements of upcoming events that are of interest to our community. This can range from AFTD sponsored educational webinars to weekly Alzheimer's Association Ask the Expert Facebook Live sessions, as well as advocacy opportunities that might come up, or research opportunities as well. And so once that happens, we do ask any newcomers in the group to introduce themselves and tell us about their connection to FTD. And then if people have really pressing issues, we ask them to volunteer and to discuss it. And the group, pitches in, shares their experiences, shares what they've found to be helpful and what they found not to be helpful as well. There's a lot of sharing. It's not just sharing feelings, it is sharing the resources that you talked about.
And sharing a laugh sometimes too. Sometimes tears.
Sharing tears many times. And we've sort of created this hug, this virtual hug, for folks that are going through a rough time. Over the past 18 months, with all that has happened with COVID, there have been quite a few of those, unfortunately.
I think a couple things to mention based on how you describe the format. So we know that many individuals are caring for their loved ones at home. So if you log into a Zoom group, do you have to have your camera on if you're at home caregiving for your loved one?
You do not. You can you can hide the camera, you can sort of hide your screen if you need to. And you can we have a call-in number. So if it's easier for you, at the 7 o'clock meeting, you might be making dinner or helping your loved one, get ready for bed. So you can just, put your headphones on, stick your phone in your pocket and use that dial-in number to call in and to hear what other folks are saying and to ask any questions you may have.
I love that. We really tell people we take you as you are. So however you want to connect with us, if you need to come a little late or leave a little early, we respect that caregivers have a lot on their plate. And we're just trying to be available to provide that support and share those resources. You also mentioned AFTD. And for those listening who don't know, that's the Association for Frontal Temporal Degeneration. And Amy and I are both AFTD trained support group facilitators, along with our co-facilitators, Bernie Metzger and Amy Marquezano. And that's really important because that connects us with the larger community of FTD caregivers, persons living with an FTD diagnosis, and even other volunteers and experts in the wider FTD community.
That's true. I mentioned AFTD educational webinars. They probably have a webinar almost once a month. Once a year, they do an annual education day for families and people diagnosed with FTD. And they even have a great advisory board of people who have the FTD diagnosis. And their input has been very valuable in the role that AFTD is playing.
So oftentimes we share a lot of resources from different, what they're called patient advocacy organizations. So that's where you think about the Association for Frontal Temporal Degeneration, the Alzheimer's Association, the Lewy Body Dementia Association, Cure PSP. These are all great resources. And I think, Amy, you have an example about one of the ways that we try to connect people with those resources.
Sure. After support group ends, I try to send out a follow-up email that mentions all of the events that I've given folks a heads up for, but also resources that we may have discussed. So here is an example from our support group on Tuesday of the follow-up email. There are quite a few events you'll see that we discussed, lots of events from the Alzheimer's Association to the Boston Area Jewish and Family Services, the Mass General Dementia Care Collaborative, as well as World FTD Awareness Week is coming up. We also included the resources we talked about. Folks talked about, we discussed memory cafes and what those consist of. So I wanted to include a list to a memory cafe directory. We also talked about the role of ombudsmen in long-term care facilities. And so I put in a link to an organization that is an advocacy group for people living in long-term care facilities, and how, folks can get in touch with their ombudsman. And we try to send this email out, within a couple hours of support group, so folks can get the access to the resources while it's still fresh in their head.
I think that also supports what we talked about before, that you can come to support group even if you're caregiving. So, you're listening in your pocket and you hear, oh, that's a great resource. I need a pen. I don't have any paper with me right now. Don't worry about it. You're going to get the email. And we make sure that everyone registers for support group. So we're going to have everybody's contact information for those follow-up emails.
That's true. And the other great reason to have everyone's emails and their contact information, because caregivers like to connect with each other offline. We had 2 caregivers who reached out to each other during our support group on Tuesday, and yet did not exchange emails during that group. So asked me to get to do the interference and share the emails between the two. And, it's really been quite rewarding to see the friendships that have grown out of support group, both in the room when we're talking, but also outside the room. Back when we met in person, there were a group of caregivers that met for dinner every month before our support group. And it's great to see that those friendships blossoming.
I mean, I feel like it's an opportunity for us to flex our muscles as matchmakers. We're just doing it for, caregivers and matchmaking friendships and mentors. I haven't heard of that we've made any love connections along the way, but we certainly foster a sense of community and connection.
Not yet, Katie.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for just talking about support group. If folks want to register to join our Boston area online FTD caregiver support group, how can they do that?
They can email ftd.boston@gmail.com. And I just want to reinforce, although we haven't, I think it's been implicit in our talk today, we haven't explicitly said this is a support group for caregivers only. It's not for people with an FTD diagnosis. AFTD has support groups for that, and you can go to the AFTD website at www.theaftd.org and click under support, and you can find groups for people with an FTD diagnosis.
And I think that we recognize the importance of support groups for both individuals living with a diagnosis, care partners, and caregivers. But I think that we need to make sure that we're providing the right support and expertise, and running a mixed group is a different type of group than if you have just individuals who are caregiving or just individuals with a diagnosis. So we want everyone to hear that we recognize how important it is to have support for those individuals with a diagnosis, but that's not what this particular group is. So reach out to AFTD, reach out to Amy, to myself, if you have questions about connecting with support group, or if your loved one's living with a diagnosis and you need a little help connecting for the support group for them. Amy, I think that you talking about resources that we commonly refer people to is a great segue to welcoming Jill Hovanasian to our series session today. Hi, Jill.
Hi there. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Jill, I just want to let the community know a little bit about you. Jill is a memory specialist working for the Dementia Care Coordination Program at the Massachusetts, New Hampshire chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Jill received her master's in social work at Salem State University, and she's worked for the association for about 5 years. Prior to her work at the association, Jill worked in hospice care and at a dementia-specific adult day health program. You know, one of the things about Jill that maybe not everybody knows is that she really has a special connection with our MGH FTD unit in that she's received training about frontal temporal dementia and frontal temporal disorders, and that we have made many referrals for dementia care consultation through Jill. So Jill, I just want to take a moment and thank you for all the support you've provided to our community.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's such a pleasure to get to work with the team at the FTD unit, to get connected with Amy, and such a pleasure to work with the patients and families you refer. So it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Now, I just mentioned that our team makes referrals to the Alzheimer's Association Dementia Care Consultation Program, and then they get connected with you. But I don't think that folks really know that much about, you know, what does a referral to the Alzheimer's Association look like? What types of services? So maybe you could start by talking about your role at the Alzheimer's Association.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so my primary role is, as you said, as part of the Dementia Care Coordination Program. Through this program, we have partnerships with care providers and payer sources who connect us directly with the patients and families that they're serving. And what that looks like is I provide one-to-one individualized support with primarily family caregivers. However, we do also work with folks who are living with a dementia diagnosis and with their larger support network as well, which I can also talk more about. But that's primarily when a referral is made to us. Myself or one of my colleagues, we're called memory specialists, get to work one-on-one with families.
And now might be a good time to just really say it explicitly. You know, who does the Alzheimer's Association serve? Who can benefit from the services? Is it only people with an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis?
That's a great question and an important point, because I think the us being titled Alzheimer's Association can sound limiting, right, for folks with different dementia diagnoses, also for folks who maybe don't have a diagnosis yet, but maybe have concerns about memory changes. So we serve kind of a whole spectrum of folks, whether it be folks who are going through the diagnostic process, folks who have a different diagnosis, maybe Lewy body, FTD, Parkinsonian dementia. So it's a whole spectrum of diagnoses, but also we're not only working with the folks living with a diagnosis, but most often we are working with family caregivers. So that could be a spousal caregiver, an adult child, or even, like I said, a network in terms of kind of a family consultation, so we can get kind of everyone on the same page.
You know, I can just hear the comprehensive nature, and I always really like imagining that individuals with a diagnosis sort of are surrounded by this love army, right? Like really passionate, dedicated individuals that don't have any skills or knowledge or expertise yet, but they're raising their hand saying, I'm ready, call me up to bat, arm me with information. I want to be part of the team. And I think that connecting with the Alzheimer's Association is a great way to start, you know, building up your strength to be a part of a care team for someone you love.
Thank you. That's so nice. That's such a nice image.
Jill, I would love it. I know how passionate you are, but I was wondering if you could talk about like this role for you. You know, you've worked in hospice, you've worked with individuals living with dementia. How is this role at the Alzheimer's Association meaningful to you?
Thanks for asking that. So I have a family connection. I have a family member who lived with late onset and a family member currently living with younger onset Alzheimer's disease. So it's been in the family. So I've been connected to the cause, but really when I went to school initially for grad school, I went for hospice care. And at some point I got redirected to dementia care. And I just really enjoyed working with folks living with dementia and getting to work and work with and support families who are living with such many times pretty complex or challenging issues. So I had hoped to work at the association someday, so I feel really lucky to get to work here.
Well, your personal passion and professional experience really make you an expert navigator for the complex journey of Alzheimer's and related dementia. So we're appreciative that you wanted to be a part of the professional community.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So I think that it would be great if you could share with us, I think you might even have a few slides about like, what is it that the Alzheimer's Association offers? Because one of the things we hope to do today is we want to help to make people feel comfortable. When they reach out to the Alzheimer's Association, what could they expect? What are the types of connections? What are the types of resources that might be available?
Yeah, that's great. I'll provide, just have a few slides, so I'll provide a bit of an overview here. Let me just share my screen really quickly. Okay, so I'm opening up my presentation now. I'm going to start at the title slide here. So as Katie shared, my name is Jill Hovanasian. I'm a social worker, and my role here at the association is as a memory specialist. I'm going to share a bit about the program that I work for called the Dementia Care Coordination Program, like we said, and then I'll also share a bit about some other programs and services and how to get connected with the Alzheimer's Association. So the DCC program, as we call it, it's a chapter developed program that it's evidence informed based on a study that we did about 8 years ago. That study grouped caregivers into two groups. One group got a helpline card and the other group got a proactive outreach call from one of our team members. And what the study found is that the group that got the proactive outreach call was able to get connected with services, reported less unmet needs, and were able to take advantage of some of this proactive care planning. Whereas the folks that got the helpline card, we noticed were reaching out more so in a more crisis or urgent situation. So ergo, this program was developed to try to provide that support to families so they feel prepared and are connected with services that are supportive and they know where to get connected to when they need additional care services or if they want to get connected with the community, which I'll talk a little bit more about as well. The reasons to connect with the Alzheimer's Association or the Dementia Care Coordination Program specifically, there are a whole bunch of reasons. There's no wrong way to get connected, but these are just some examples. So that maybe that there's a new diagnosis, you may be going through the diagnostic process. Caregivers may have questions about things like behavior or communication strategies. You may be interested in care options in the community, or even things like long-term planning and housing options. As we discussed, you do not have to be caring for someone with an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. It could be any sort of dementia diagnosis or just concerns for your loved one's memory changes or even your own. I'm going to advance to the next slide here. So the care consultation is the primary service that's offered through the Dementia Care Coordination Program. When we get referrals from our care providers, such as the MGH FTD unit, we're reaching out to families to schedule these calls. We offer phone calls and video conferences. It's usually about an hour to an hour and a half long. We spend this time, myself, like I said, I'm called a memory specialist, and we have a team of memory specialists, all of whom have experience and expertise in the dementia care field. We spend that time, we want to try to answer questions or concerns that families may have. We provide disease education, communication strategies, education, information about community resources, and certainly emotional support for all that families are dealing with. This program, the Dementia Care Coordination Program, and the other programs that I'll talk about that the association offers are always no charge to families. I'm going to advance to the next slide here. After we speak with families, we put together what we call a care plan. It's essentially just a summary of the resources that we've discussed. This is just one example. It's certainly a longer one, but you'll see, like in this example here on the screen, there's some action steps that are included, and then there are some a summary of some communication strategies. So what we hope this care plan can be for folks is both a guide, so something you can check off, like for example, on this care plan, there's a recommendation to consult with an elder law attorney. There are names for a few elder law attorneys and a link to our legal and financial tip sheet. There's a list of adult day programs and a consumer guide for day programming. And then at the end, there's more so the caregiving strategies. That's something that we could use on an ongoing basis. So we hope it can act as a guide for folks to reference as needed as questions come up. Again, this is just one example. Sometimes they're shorter or longer, just whatever the capacity of the family is or what they're really looking for. I'm going to advance to the next slide here. We also at the association, both through the DCC program, but also when you get connected to the Helpline or any of our other services, we offer these supporting materials. So we have so many tip sheets on anything that you may have questions about. So whether that be, we have a tip sheet called Tips for Living Day to Day. It has a list of examples of small adaptations to daily tasks in order to maximize independence for folks living with dementia. We have tip sheets about how to help provide personal care, legal financial tips, driving booklet, and then this family care guide that I like to share with folks. This can act as a good guidepost. It has a different list of common symptoms, symptom management, resources, and this is something that families can keep and loop back to frequently. And then I go to the next slide here. So for ongoing support, more specific to the DCC program, after that more in-depth care consultation, we offer, typically it's 3 follow-up calls over the course of about 6 months. And that could be follow-up calls, emails, or texts, whatever works best for the family. But we also have these other programs here. So we try to get folks connected with our support groups, our education program, or our early stage engagement programs. Again, all of these are, of course, offered at no charge to families, but this is where really the community comes into play. Of course, we know that caregiving experience can be so isolating, so we hope to connect folks with the community. So for example, these early stage engagement programs, specifically I'm thinking of our ALZ Meetup program, ALZ Meetup. This is truly a social program, but it's an opportunity to get to connect with other people living with early stage symptoms as well as their care partners. These, along with our other programs, are offered virtually right now. There are some in-person programming, but primarily it's virtual. The meetups are held every Thursday morning. There's a different theme to each week. And we have heard really positive feedback. My colleague Jenna facilitates these groups, and she shared that folks have really found community in this group. Our other groups, so support groups, which Amy talked about, can be such a great connection for folks to both receive emotional support, resources, certainly, and a sense of community for other folks who get it, providing normalization and validation, and getting connected with some of the resources too. So the support groups, we do have a variety of specialized groups. So we have groups that are specific for folks living with younger onset Alzheimer's disease, support groups for care partners for someone who's living with early stage symptoms. We have a support group for young adult children who are caring for a parent with young onset Alzheimer's disease. And then we even have a male caregiver support group, female caregiver support group. So whoever it is that you're caring for or supporting, we hope to be able to have a group for you. And also we have groups for folks living with a diagnosis or with memory changes. Lastly, our education programs. So again, most of these are virtual currently. So we have pre-recorded programs as well as live webinars. We have a variety of topics. Over the past year and a half, we have developed some specialized programs trying to meet the needs of folks who are caregiving at home and could be experiencing some isolation and may have some unanswered questions. So for example, we had a program for folks who are caring for someone who's living in a facility and maybe they're not able to visit them as often. Or we also had a program about dealing with a very difficult holiday season. Going to the next slide here. So I talked about our DCC program as kind of one entry point to the Alzheimer's Association, and they support groups and education programs. But the other great entry point is the 24/7 helpline. So the 24/7 helpline is truly 24/7. It's staffed by master's level social workers and counselors, all of whom have a dementia specialty. And these folks are there to answer questions. You could call with one question, 10 questions. You could call not knowing what to ask. You could call just when you're having a hard day or a hard night or a hard 2 in the morning and call and ask for support. I'm obviously biased, but I will say these folks are really skilled and really compassionate clinicians who are on the other end of the phone and want to be able to support you. I think sometimes the helpline can sound like hotline, and 800 number can feel not personal, but I will say are all colleagues of mine, and truly, even if you're not sure why you're calling, I think it can be helpful to reach out for support even before you need it, or even if you're just curious, maybe I want to try a support group, but I have questions about it, or maybe I have concerns for my loved one's memory changes, but it's scary and I don't know where to start. So you can always call this number. There's also a live chat option you'll see on this slide here that's open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And lastly, on the helpline topic, if there is perhaps an unmet need that could be better served by someone locally, our helpline staff will get you connected with our local chapter. And the next and last slide here. So this is just an overview. The Alzheimer's Association offers care consultation, both through the Dementia Care Coordination Program and by calling the helpline. We'll connect you with community resources and provide referrals to things like care agencies, day programs, housing options. We have education programs, of course, support groups. And then we also do advocacy and raise funds for research. Here is our 800 number. So 800-272-3900. Jot that down if you'd like and keep it in your phone if you ever need some support. And there's also our website. There's a ton of information on the website. So please, don't hesitate to reach out if you're ever looking for support.
Jill, wow. I mean, how often do you hear about an organization that is saying, we are here for you 24/7? And again, come as you are. You don't have to prepare anything. It doesn't have to be a specific question. It could be just that feeling of isolation and loneliness, that wondering, and you can reach out and get support. I mean, that really stands out to me as one of the triumphs of the Alzheimer's Association, to be able to offer that service to families in the community.
And speaking as an economist, it's all free. That's really amazing. And I know that my donations to the organization are doing great work.
That's so nice. Yeah, I will say that the helpline, it's a great resource, and the one of my colleagues always says that it's always disappointing when folks say after the fact, I wish I knew about this when I was caregiving. So yeah, it is a great resource, and we hope folks will reach out because there is support there. And I can appreciate it's hard to reach out. It's hard to make that call, especially when you're thinking, oh, do I need this hotline, or who am I going to be talking to? But I would encourage you to give it a try, because there is support out there for you.
There's support, and I think there's something to be said too for professional support, in the way that your neighbor might be very well intentioned, but they could give you information that might misguide you. And so if there's a question on your mind, if you had to choose between going to Google all alone in the middle of the night when you're feeling alone and isolated, or picking up the phone and calling the Alzheimer's Association, I would tell you to call the Alzheimer's Association. Have a guide with you for this journey. Nobody should do it alone, and you don't have to do it alone. We don't have a cure today for these devastating conditions, but we have a cure right now for the isolation and loneliness that may come with an Alzheimer's or related dementia diagnosis. So thank you, Jill, for being a part of that. And Amy, thank you for being a part of the session today as well. Before I let you both go, I was hoping that you would come back, and Amy, maybe we could start with you. I wanted to ask you both, what's one piece of advice that you might offer to families who are new on the journey?
Well, Katie, you've already said it, actually. You don't have to alone. Find the organization specific to your disease: the Alzheimer's Association, AFTD, the Lewy Body Dementia Association, Cure PSP, and find a support group near you. This is especially important for families dealing with a diagnosis, or a rare or early onset dementia. The challenges facing these families are very different from those associated with a typical geriatric Alzheimer's case. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a new caregiver come to group with what they perceive as an insurmountable problem in their life, dealing with their dementia. And they explain what the problem is, and then they see a screen full of faces nodding knowingly in recognition of that issue. And that is so powerful to caregivers, to know that others are out there walking not the same journey, but a very similar journey to theirs, and they can help.
Those are powerful words. We both said them. It just makes it more powerful, right? Thank goodness. Jill, what about you? You know, when you meet a family for the first time, I'm sure there's so many pieces of advice and resources you could give them. Is there a takeaway that you often find you want to share with families new to the journey?
Yeah, thank you. I would really echo what both of you said, which is reach out to someone, whether that be one of the associations, a care provider, a local support group, even sometimes through your senior center, because there really is a whole world of support there. And it can feel so isolating and so irregular, right? And also, when you're experiencing that isolation, it can be hard to know how to navigate or where to start. And there are folks who their role is to do exactly that, or can just provide the really valuable, what comes in a support group, normalization and validation, and how great it feels to have those nodding heads at the other end of the screen. It's such a nice image. So yes, anyway, that's a long way of saying reach out, and reach out before you need it.
A bold and important message, and a timely one. Well, thank you to everyone who engaged in our session today. We're honored that you share some of your precious time with us to learn more about the resources and supports available in the greater dementia community. The Massachusetts General Hospital Community Forum Fridays aim to empower our community members with education, information, and knowledge about the resources available to them. All of our Community Forum Friday webinars are recorded and posted on our MGH FTD unit YouTube channel. I hope that you'll check out our library of videos, that you'll consider signing up for a support group, and if you ever need help, that you'll reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you, everyone. Be well. See you next time.